lots of words that can be used to both join sentences together and show contrast. The one that students use the most is but. Today I'll show you how to replace but with advanced words to show flexibility and to impress the examiner. Remember, we don't want limited, we want flexible. If you find the content useful so far, please remember to subscribe and click the like button below. What other words do you know that mean but? How many words do you know that mean but? Any? Let's have a look at some of them, which is used as commonly as but. Nevertheless, although, even though, despite, in spite of, and whereas. Each of these words can be used to show contrast, just like but. Some of them are used slightly different from others. Let's start with however and nevertheless. However and nevertheless usually appear at the beginnings of sentences and do not join sentences together. For example, I wanted to go to the concert, however, I did not have enough money. The weather forecast predicted rain all day. Nevertheless, we decided to go outside for a picnic. So these are useful to show a little bit of flexibility, but there are better ones. Let's start with although and even though. So both although and even though are used with clauses. That's a subject plus a verb. Let's look at examples comparing although and even though to but. An example with but. I wanted to go to the concert, but I didn't have enough money. Or, although I wanted to go to the concert, I didn't have enough money. If we want to show emphasis in this sentence, we use even though. Even though the house is in poor condition, they paid a lot of money for it. Another example with but and then although. It was sunny, but it was quite cold outside. Although it was sunny, it was quite cold outside. Therefore, although and even though are different words. Therefore, although and even though are alternatives to using but, and they have a slightly different meaning also. And this is the case with higher level words. They always have a little more detail than the basic general words, for example, but. Talking of higher level words that can possibly have the examiner thinking of a higher mark, let's look at despite or in spite of. Despite and in spite of are followed by noun phrases or the gerund, that's the ing form of the verb. So the grammar is different. Example, despite playing basketball every day, he was still out of shape. In spite of playing basketball every day, he was still out of shape. So in spite of and despite of used in the same way. With although he played basketball every day, he was still out of shape. So although and even though are better than but, and if they're used correctly, the examiner could be thinking, 6, let's listen for more, and maybe his vocabulary will get a better score. With despite and in spite of, they're slightly better than although and even though, and maybe the examiner is considering an even higher score. He'll listen for more. As always, there are common mistakes to avoid when using these words. The most common is the use of although and but in the same sentence. Although I love chocolate, but I never eat it. So this is a mistake. Why? Because you're using although and but when you're just needing one contrast word. Correct is, although I love chocolate, I never eat it. So using although and but in this sentence, when there's only two clauses, is like saying the same word twice. This would impact your mark negatively in the sense that you're trying to use although, so the examiner is thinking about a 5, but you're using it wrongly, so he'll probably keep thinking a 5, and you want him to think higher. If you want him to think higher, use it correctly. Let's look at one more, whereas. So what's the difference between whereas and the other words we've been looking at, although? Well, when you use whereas, it doesn't talk about a surprising contrast. It talks more about a contrast, a balancing contrast between two things. For example, John prefers classical music, whereas Mary enjoys jazz. Nothing surprising there. There are two balanced contrasts here. And to contrast, let's look at an example with although. Although it was raining, we decided to go hiking. So this word, although, suggests a contrast, but it's a little bit surprising. So remember, using but on its own over and over again is very repetitive, it's limited and not flexible. We want flexibility. But as a word will not impress the examiner. So there are levels to impress the examiner. Try although and even though, then try despite and in spite of and whereas. And the examiner will be thinking vocabulary, possibly joining words, cohesive devices, high up in the 7 range at least. So be brave. Try using these advanced words in your IELTS speaking and writing examination. I'm sure the examiner will notice and your mark will improve. See you next time.